I'm just gonna
So, we've had a good break, a good time to talk, a good time to hear about the poster, see the other ones. So Molly and Abby, take it away.
Okay. So our presentation is Taking Flight with Entangled Learning, and it's about our role as coaches in the CU 1970 class and also in our smaller community of practice that was comprised of the two of us, Paul and Laurel.
I want to give a little bit of background of how I got involved in Entangled Learning, and then Abby will do the same. I was an SI leader for general chemistry, but I was the SI leader for the glue chemistry section, which is chem for biologists, because I'm a biology major, and I took that my freshman year. I took both sections of glue chemistry, so then I became the SI for glue chemistry. And what a lot of the students would say when they were in glue chemistry is they would be like, I really wish that we had an SI for biology, because they were all in this principles of biology course because they were biology majors. And they would say, I really wish we had one, I really wish we had one. So I went to Laurel and I said, Laurel, is there any way that we can do that? But DFW rate wasn't exactly what it was supposed to be. And she said,
It wasn't bad enough.
and she said, but I have this idea. And that's when I learned about Entangled Learning and how I got involved in it, and that's how I'm here.
And I got involved in Entangled Learning because I took the CU 10 or 1110. I get all my CUs confused. But CU 1110 when I became an SI leader last spring, and it was still evolving Entangled Learning as a concept. So I got kind of thrown into it before it was fully developed. And she read my learning portfolio at the end of the semester, and she said, "Hey, I really think that this idea would mesh well with you. Would you like to join our creative inquiry?" And that's where it started.
All right, so we're going to give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. We want to talk about coaching and what coaching was like last semester when we implemented Entangled Learning into the first part of biology, and then we're going to talk about how it changed to this semester. And then we're going to talk about our community learning design and what we've discovered as our practice.
Yeah, and then we want to talk about just CU 1970, the training course, what it was, how it worked, what it took to really get the students to branch off and embrace Entangled Learning. We also have some statistics on the ASE learning outcomes. We compared their learning portfolios to those outcomes, so we'll talk about that a little bit, and then our future goals with Entangled Learning and with this creative inquiry.
Okay, so the first part that we want to talk about is coaching, and our community has kind of changed from last semester to this semester, and then it even changed in this semester a little bit. So originally our community was comprised of me, Abby, and two other students who are no longer coaches, but they contributed a lot in the past. And then from there, when we moved forward, Laurel joined our community. And then this semester, we started our community as me, Abby, and Laurel. And then a little into the, I'm not sure exactly what week, but we started Skyping Paul into our community, and it really changed the dynamic and helped us see Entangled Learning in a different light and culture.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our practice, basically what is coaching, what we know, what we learned throughout the semester, and some questions that we still have, and then later on we'll talk about the future some more. So if you want to go to our practice, was defining the role of a coach in general in Entangled Learning, not just within CU 1970, although CU 1970 was kind of the outlet which we used to figure out what coaching was. So what we found, and this is something that we learned from last semester to this semester, coach should be proactive instead of reactive. So last semester we waited for students to email us. We waited to see if they had questions. We never really reached out to them. And this semester we made it more apparent that we were available to the students, and that made a huge difference. Another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that was creating a friendly atmosphere. So the students knew us, they knew our face, they knew our majors, they knew where they could find us, they knew our email address, some of them had our phone numbers. And so the fact that they knew us and we also knew them made it easier for them to reach out to us because they felt like they were talking to a friend or a peer, which is what we were designed to be, and we are.
Yeah, and then last semester the coaches didn't actually get to spend a lot of time in the classroom. And then when we incorporated CU 1970, the coaches actually were in every class. So we made sure that we had contact hours with the students every single week, and in addition to that, we attended a couple of workshops, and we met with a couple of students outside of class if they emailed us and said, hey, we need a little bit of help, can you meet us now? So we really upped our coaching hours, and that kind of raised a couple of questions, and it helped us see what a coach wasn't.
Yeah, so we figured out that a coach is not supposed to be a director of learning. Just as the instructor in Entangled Learning is not supposed to be hands-on and saying this is what you do, that's not the role of the coach either. The coach is supposed to ask questions that will get the students headed in the right direction. And with those questions, we can also prompt them to find their own resources and help to facilitate peer review and peer feedback, as opposed to us saying, this is what you need to do.
And in our practice, we spent a lot of time in our coaches' meetings, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the questions that we could ask to lead communities in the direction that we kind of wanted them to go. So we didn't want to tell them where they should be going, or we didn't want to necessarily suggest. We wanted to ask them questions that led to hints that would put them on the right track. So we didn't want to pick them up and tell them exactly what to do.
Yeah. So we figured out along the way that we have some questions about coaching still. How do we make coaching sustainable? So something that we've run into, Molly's graduating in December, I'm studying abroad next semester. So we're having difficulty figuring out where we're going to draw new coaches from. Are the students in CU 1970 interested enough to continue their practice and become coaches? How are we going to set up training if that is the case? So that's something that we've struggled with a little bit and we're still grappling with. And we've also asked the question, is the role of a coach necessary? There was a while at the beginning of the semester when we weren't being contacted by the students, even though we were reaching out, and that bothered us a lot, and we didn't know if we were just something else that they had to deal with and that was in the way of their learning, or if we were just there, or if we could be beneficial. So that was something that we really struggled with as well.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the EL training course, which is CU 1970. So to answer the logistical questions, kind of what is it? So CU 1970 is a pass-fail course that's designed to increase understanding and participation in entangled learning. So we really wanted to take these students who, a lot of the students had kind of had a little bit of exposure to entangled learning, and we really wanted to show them how entangled really works, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to work with it some more.
Yep, so the participants were students from Dr. DR's Principles of Biology class, and they signed up voluntarily. Basically, the idea was pitched to them that if they enrolled in this 1 credit hour class, then they would receive, I believe it was 5 extra credit points on their final grade in biology, given that they passed the course. And so many of them did that. It was a great incentive, but some of them also were not enrolled in his class, but they were last semester, so they were exposed to entangled learning, and they decided to pursue entangled learning in this course because they felt that it was beneficial and it was an intrinsic motivation.
And then kind of the question is, how are the students going to be assessed? How is their learning going to be assessed at the end of the semester? These projects that you saw is one of the ways that we assess them. There was a separate rubric for that, basically about how much students really understood their roles as entangled learners, their being able to understand the deep learning cycle and all of that kind of stuff. The posters were a great way to ask questions and have them explain their posters. That was a great way to be able to assess their learning. And in addition to that, for the individual learning portfolios that all of the students had to write, the deep learning literacy rubric, which was created by Laurel and Paul, was applied to all of those.
So getting started, we had at the very beginning of the semester, students came in. Some of them knew each other because they were in the same biology class previously, but some of them didn't. So we had them create their own personal profiles, which were basically websites that had an About Me section, and most of them had skills that they had that they could contribute to a community. So this was used to aid in community formation. We had the students create those on the first day. On the second day of class, they came in and everyone had their laptops set out and they walked around and saw the different people, they saw their faces, they saw what assets they could bring to the community and how that would balance well with them. And so the communities were expected to meet outside of class, and that was where they would do their biology work. Inside of class, they were working on entangled learning, or they were learning about entangled learning. So I think that was a bit of a point of confusion for the students at first, was that there wasn't there was no double dipping of work between CU 1970 and biology. They were using entangled learning to do biology. So during CU 1970, the students were, as I said, exposed to the EL concepts, and they weren't necessarily working within their smaller communities. It was more one large community. We all talked, and that was how that was structured.
Yeah, so this was getting started, and then we want to talk a little bit about the evolution of class over time, because as the semester progressed, things kind of changed, but they changed definitely for the better. So the next 3 little segments are about that, and we color-coded them like a stoplight because that's kind of how we saw in our mind that it worked.
So to begin with, we had the beginning of class, which we qualified as week 1 to week 7. And this was an instructor-led class, and we had agendas that we had set up. All the students could access them through Google Drive, and they were required to do attendance. So in that sense, it was very interactive. They had access to the Google Drive. But what we were going to talk about was already set on the agenda. So there was very little interaction time between the coaches and the students, just because a lot of it was spent talking about EL concepts. So Molly and I were we were documenting most of the time, but we were sitting over to the side. For about the last 15 minutes, we would talk to the students because that was more interactive activities. We had them do some matrices, they worked in clusters, things like that. And it seemed like the students really struggled to grasp the concepts of entangled learning as a whole, which was frustrating for us because we were spending so much class time devoted to explaining it to them. So that was hard, and we kind of realized that things weren't working well when we had them do a peer review activity, and they did what most undergraduate students do in peer review and just say, wow, good job, A+. And that really fell short of what we wanted them to do.
Yeah, so as we were talking about these things and we were going through, a couple of weeks earlier we had realized in our coaching community that we were kind of doing very similar things. We were following a syllabus, we were checking things off, we were doing what needed to be done, and Laurel was providing material for us. And it was kind of like, wait, this isn't really how it's supposed to work. This isn't in the spirit of entangled learning. And we took a flip, and it was more of the coaches leaning in equally, and we provided different weeks, we would provide different articles, and whatever we wanted to talk about, we would bring to the table, and that's how entangled learning is supposed to work. And that is what Laurel realized on week 8. So when we opened up our emails, I don't know, I'm sorry if this embarrasses you. We opened up our emails the morning before on Thursday, before we had class, and this is what Abby and I got to read. So you guys can take a second and read it. This is what the warning Laurel gave us, that she was going to press the reset button. And when you look back at our reflections and when you look back at student reflections and student learning portfolios that we've gotten to read, everyone talks about the reset. It's just like, it's not just like Laurel decided to press the reset button and no one knew about it, everyone knew. And it was this big, I think it's the title of our agenda, but it was the reset button, and we decided to let students be self-directed, and we weren't going to provide agendas for them anymore.
So the way that kind of looked from week 9 on to the rest of the semester, we had no weekly class agendas, so students were required to bring their own community agendas that they would work on during class. There is no class-wide plan. New communities were formed based on interest in entangled learning, and the students ended up staying in their biology communities. But it was interesting because a lot of them had similar interests around EL, so it worked out very well. And that was also good because they already had the group dynamics down, they knew each other, they were comfortable with each other, so that was important. So class time was spent in the EL-based communities, so the students worked on that. They had their new learning focus on discovering different components within their learning design focused on EL. Molly and I had a lot more time to talk to the students. We could walk around because now they had 50 minutes to talk about their entangled learning thing. So they had questions. They would say, am I doing my learning design correctly? Is this a good resource I can use? How should we be collaborating on Google Drive? Things like that. Just really important questions that we wanted them to be asking at the beginning of the semester. And so we had a few end of the semester requirements that were stipulated by the syllabus, and this was a synthesis of their learning through learning portfolios and the group posters. So their learning portfolios were turned in through Blackboard, and then they have these posters and they gave the poster presentation. But we really took a more hands-off approach. Those were the only 2 requirements that we had for them for the 5 weeks in the rest of the semester. And so this gave them a chance to be self-directed learners, and they really began to understand EL, and they really jumped into the culture of EL, which is what we wanted.
Yeah, and from a coach's perspective, it's kind of funny that as soon as we took our hands off, they came to us and started asking us questions. They emailed us. I got text messages. All of the stuff that